Welcome back to episode 71 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testori. On this episode, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Jahmad Canley, who is the CEO of Potential Unleashed Consulting. They specialize in customized organizational consulting and training for personal and professional development in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. This conversation was one that had me brimming. His thought process with regards to business and how he includes his team just heightens and shows the way how he thinks about transforming and going from a business to a company, which is what we discuss throughout the podcast. He also talks about how he really encompasses his family in his business and he would rather sacrifice profits for enjoyment. This is a man who just has phenomenal balance with regards to his business, his family, and his life. And I think he's a great person to look at if you're someone who wants to get a bit more harmonious with your journey. You're going to enjoy this one. Take care. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Jahmad, welcome. Pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today.
You're welcome. Jahmad, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
Yeah, great question. I think growth for me, well, let me ask this question, Joe. Do you want me to speak from our company perspective and or also from just in general?
Both.
Okay, you got it. Yeah. Growth for us at Potential Unleashed definitely looks like being able to offer more specialized solutions to more people, right? I was speaking with a coach not long ago, maybe a year or so ago, and they were asking us about our growth and our growth goals. And they asked a really interesting question about sales and marketing. And they said, out of curiosity, do you have a sales problem or a marketing problem? And I said, I'm not sure. And they said, well, here's the question. What is your percentage of closing when you actually have a client to speak with? And our closing is over 90%. If we talk to a client, we close over 90% of the clients. And so they said, well, what are you looking to do? And I said, grow. And they said, okay, so it's not a sales problem. It's probably a marketing problem. You need to get in front of more people. You're doing a great job of closing. And so for us, I think that's part of what growth looks like, is being able to continue to expand our offerings to more clients. We work right now in 5 different countries. We want to continue to expand that. There's definitely some places that I would love to go and work with. We want to work with some different organizations. And when I say expand, I don't want to expand just for the sake of expanding. So even when we talk about expanding our programs, it's not just about creating more programs. It's really about creating tailored programs that fit the needs of the clients that we're working with and that we hear. So that's what growth for us at Potential Unleashed looks like: being innovative, really trying to deliver things in a way that makes sense for people. If we were to go back in time and look at 7 years ago, we were already doing a lot of work online because some of our clients were universities and they had professors, adjunct professors. They also had online offerings. And so we were doing a lot already with Zoom, but to what that looks like today is completely different, right? And so, growth looks like being able to keep up with technology, not just keep up with technology, but find really cool, creative, innovative ways to embed technology and meet the needs of the people. Growth in general for me looks like, how do you keep growing and expanding and stretching in different areas? Growth doesn't always mean more. In a sense, to me, on a personal level, growth can mean better understanding. Growth can mean, getting better at the things that you already do.
And sometimes that growth is invisible. I had a conversation with a client recently who was a little bit frustrated, and they were saying they're not growing, but then sometimes it's the Pareto principle that they might be doing 80% of the work that isn't doing anything, and the last 20% is what shows that. It's similar to the bamboo tree. It takes 5 years to grow, and the first 4 or 5 years you don't see any growth, but then you see
Right.
after 5 years. So it's watering this plant taking time, and then eventually we see the growth. And we know that growth in business is never linear. It's up and down. It's choppy.
So true. It reminds me of the example that they often use of bamboo, right? And you know how you don't see it growing underneath the soil for so long, but all of a sudden once it breaks ground it shoots up, but
Mm-hmm.
how easy it can be. And one of my mentors said this to me once, and I thought it was really interesting. And he said, be careful not to rip the plants out of the ground to check the roots to see if they're growing.
Wow.
Right. And he
Wow,
said,
that's deep, and that could be used in so many facets of life. That could be used in your health, wellness, your relationships. It's how many times have you been to the gym and been on a program and you're working towards something, and then ripping the roots could just be, I'm going to stop training,
yeah,
or I'm just going to eat junk food, and then we know there's upward spirals, there's downward spirals equally, but this leads to these things uh, that they're hidden invisible forces that take place as time goes on and compounds. So it's a great analogy that he mentioned, or they mentioned. Sorry. Talking
yeah,
about mentors, are there any mentors that you've worked with that you can share? Anyone who's been a real beacon of guidance throughout your career?
yeah, absolutely. Lou Tice, who I speak about a lot in my book, because he was one of my biggest business mentors, was Lou Tice. And he was the founder of the Pacific Institute, phenomenal company. And I had the opportunity to not only work underneath Lou, but be personally mentored by him for years. And that helped me tremendously stretch my comfort zone, understand things. At the time I was 27 years old, and I would walk into spaces where people would tell me, kid, I've been in business longer than you've been alive. you know and Lou was a big help in really helping me figure out how to navigate those spaces, how to build. So many people talk often about this work life balance, and Lou was a really great mentor in helping me understand not just work life balance but life work balance. Another great mentor of mine is still Dr. Joe Pace, another great friend, and he was another person. And I don't know that Joe knows that he was a mentor. I think he probably thinks of himself more as a friend and a colleague. But I watched him incorporate his family into everything that he did for business, and that was really important for me. Being
How did he do that?
anytime that he would travel, he would often bring his wife with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that that was so interesting. And it's something that I really began to model. At the time, I was newly married. We're now coming up on 18 years. But at the time, we were
Okay.
newlyweds. And, and as we grew our family, we now have 4 children. That's something that has
And
always,
three dogs.
and three puppies at the moment, Joe.
And you go on
Right.
record say you're adopting them.
What was that?
Are you going to go on record say you're going to adopt them?
Yeah, I'm not going to do that just yet. Not just
I'm going
yet.
to forward your son to a kid so they quite.
But I'll keep you posted though. But having children and having a spouse, that was really important to me. I never wanted to sacrifice my family in order to grow the business. And so watching them as, again, mentors was extremely helpful for me, and watching how they balance those things. And
Mhm.
so, for example, when I first started off, there were times when I would break even on a contract because if I traveled for more than 2 nights, I would bring my wife and daughter with me.
Mhm.
And it meant something to me. I showed up better for my clients when I knew that, you know, I had them with me, and I traveled a lot. I mean, for example, I was traveling on average 250,000 miles a year, you know. So that was really important for me to figure out how to balance those things. And then another mentor is Denise Mills. I modeled a lot of our consulting company off of Denise, and she's just been a great mentor over the years. She is the a CEO of an organization called Leaderfield, and just the way that she thinks, the way that she centers people and human beings first in the business was something that struck me and something that I always wanted to model. The way that we customize our programs at Potential Unleash really comes a lot from what I saw her do. It wasn't a cookie cutter, let's grab this off the shelf and just give it to the people in the hope. that it works. It was always listening to the client and figuring out what their needs are, and then trusting that you could create something, you know, special for them that would really fit their needs. And so I modeled a lot of how we approach the work at Potential Unleashed from Denise. And yeah, so those are three mentors off the top. And of course, in business and in my personal life, lots of great mentors. My father, you know, uncles and other people who've just been great mentors for me. And just what does it look like to be the type of man that I want to be, the type of human being I want to be, the type of father, the type of husband. I think mentors are important. I'll say this and I'll be quiet, Joe, because I tell this to everyone that I coach. If your mentor doesn't have a mentor, you probably need a new mentor, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's so well said. And I always think that the people who I coach, I often reference my mentors, and they're they're ever present. You have mentors who you're very aligned with for a few years, and then you drift out, and they're into a different journey. You're into a different journey, but there's always someone there who maybe 5, 10 steps ahead of you. Who, for me, is just always you've got a situation or a problem or a challenge, or even a celebration that they can you can celebrate with, but they can help just ground you a little bit more, so you can see
yes,
that perspective. And I love the fact that you said about you would compromise profit for family. And I think um, there's a term known as hyper specialization, where
mhm,
you look at Tiger Woods as a fantastic instant. He is, or he was for a very long period of time, the world's best golfer.
yes,
But look at what happened to his family. Look at his personal life. His relationship with his dad is not good in us in
yeah,
slightest, but he's paid a price for the success that he's achieved. And some people are happy to pay that price.
yeah,
Whereas others, like yourself, you would rather take less profit and less money so you can be more well rounded. And showing up as a family man, a father, is what's important to you. And I think it's a really powerful lesson that a lot of young people can learn. I'm curious, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Ooh, to my 20-year-old self, that I think I would say to my 20-year-old self, follow your heart, follow your dreams, and understand that even if it doesn't exist today, you can create it, right? And the reason why I say that is because so much of my earlier years, 18, 19, 20, was trying to figure out what career did I want, right? In college, changing majors and everything else, because I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to be based off of what I had seen. What I do today, I hadn't seen yet, right? You know what I mean? Like, um, here's a great example. I went into college under education. So that was cool. I wanted to be an educator. And then I started thinking about the financial implications of being an educator. And I said, I don't know that that's going to work for me. So then I switched to international business because I always had a mind and a passion for business. And I thought international business would be great. And then they said, you're going to have to learn some different languages. And I said, I don't know about that. Right. And so then I switched again and management information systems technology, because everyone said this is the path, technology is the future and everything else. But I say all that to say, I think about what I do now. I travel around the world educating people. So I do international business. And the way that I do it is by training and workshops and getting to educate people. I didn't see that back then. And so I was limiting myself based off of the career paths that I could see. I didn't know what a consultant was. I didn't know anyone who worked in a consulting firm. I remember when I first started thinking about this work and doing this work and public speaking and all of these different things, I didn't know anyone who was making a living off of doing those things. But by the time I was 23, I decided to trust myself that this was something that I was passionate about. And I believe that if I worked at it, I was passionate about it, and if I worked to be effective, that I could make a living doing it. But at 20, I was definitely following the status quo path, right? Of okay, here are the careers that you can choose from. Pick one of these, even if you're not truly fully passionate about it, pick one because that's what you do. And, it's stable and all of those different things. I would tell myself now, my 20-year-old self, acquire as much knowledge as you can, find the right people, follow the idea and the dream that you have in your head. Because I always think like, wow, I see young people now at 20 and I'm so inspired by what they are doing because they're not sticking to the status quo traditional path. They're starting businesses at 20, right? They're collaborating, they're jumping into things, they're finding the people that they need, and they're having their ideas, and and they're going after those things. I think that's what I would have told myself at 20.
So speaking of knowledge, and that's a very sound advice that you gave there. We mentioned you're an author, you've got a ton of books behind you. What are a few business book recommendations you could share with the audience that have really inspired and helped your career progress?
Yeah. One book that I think is phenomenal is it's called Your Brain is Almost Perfect. And I love that book because it combines two of my passions, which is psychology and business.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gives so many great examples and applicable things. Like it talks about how anytime that any living thing is going to make a decision, it assesses cost versus value. And it talks about human beings, but it breaks it all the way down to a flea, right? And it explains that before a flea chooses to jump onto an animal or jump off of an animal, it is assessing the amount of energy it will take, right? So the cost versus the value. And so that's why you see higher levels during certain times. It's because they recognize if they stay outside, they'll freeze to death. And so the costs is, yes, it takes a lot of energy to make that leap, but the value of life. But it explains the same thing for human beings, that anytime that we're trying to assess whether or not we're going to invest in something, right? We go through this process of cost versus value. Before you decide, if you lose the remote control when you're watching TV on the couch, you assess cost versus value. What's coming on next, right? Is it worth me getting up off the couch to go turn the TV or to look for the remote? Or, hey, you know what? I can sit through this show, so you're constantly going through this. But then it also explains this other piece. It gives this great example. And it says, imagine that you're running like a marathon, which I know you recently just did. And you're running it through the desert. And at the very end, you're thirsty and everything else. And you come to a vending machine. And there's soda. There's, I think it mentions soda and water and a mystery can. And it's just a simple question. You have $1. They each cost $1. Where do you put your dollar? And even though this thing that's in the mystery can might be the healthiest thing for you, you're going through cost versus value analysis. And because you've never experienced it before, someone can be there telling you like, hey, buy the mystery can, buy the silver can, buy the silver can. You're like, I only have $1 and I'm thirsty. I'm going to buy the water. Some people would say, I'm going to buy the Coca-Cola. And so they talk about one of the ways that you can actually, understanding how the mind works, one of the ways that you can increase the likelihood that people would buy the silver can is if you give samples, right? And look at what Costco does. A big wholesale realtor here, they sell so many products by giving samples. So again, that's one of my favorite business books because it breaks down the psychology of selling. It breaks down the psychology of how people purchase. It breaks down the psychology of what might be holding you back in your own business, because we're always assessing cost versus value. If I invest in this product, what's the cost versus what's the value, right? And all those things. That's one of my favorite books. I love Atomic Habits. It's another great book that I love. I think that's really helpful for a lot of people in a lot of ways to think about things through that lens. Another great one of my favorite books is Psychopictography by Vernon Howard. And it's a really fancy name, but it really stands for, it's a book of mental pictures. And again, I love books that are not just theory, but have application. So those are some of my favorite books. I just think that awareness is great. Application is better. And so even when I teach myself, I always want to give people something to apply. And those books really focus on not just theory, but here's how you can apply this.
It's one of the problems I had with business school a little bit. You've got a lot of teachers who are professors who are theorists,
Yeah.
but a lot of the application that I learned was uh, how would you how do you expand into an international market and focus on uh, just making sure that you're pricing the product at the right price. But we know that the biggest challenge starting, and you mentioned this point, you go from a business to a company. A lot of these
Yeah.
concepts are for companies. When you start a business, the biggest challenge, and this is what you mentioned, it's if your sales conversion rate is 90%, then you don't have a sales issue, you have a marketing issue because it means that
Yes.
your selling is great, probably because it's a very warm or hot audience. But I guarantee if you were to run paid ads, and that's kind of like my background, if you're achieving a 30% conversion rate, then that's a good conversion rate because that's
Yeah.
the awareness. People don't have awareness to you and your brand. But there's a lot of theory that's just projected out there without actually, hey, well, this is what I did to grow my business. And I think a lot of people can get tons of substance from mentorships and coaches and training with one-to-one experts who have actually walked that path. So, talking about the journey for you and where the business is at now, spoke about business to companies. How do you think Potential Unleashed went through the journey of being a business to becoming a company?
Yeah. You want me to talk about some of my biggest growing pains, right?
I'd love that.
um, but that's exactly what it is. I think when you and I were talking before, I mentioned there's a lot of things out there for startups, right? And how to kind of start a business. There's a lot of things out there for leaders who are already in well-established companies. But there's not a lot of things out there to talk about how you move from that business to a company. And that was key for us. It took me, I'll be honest, it took me a while to really begin to shift my mindset because the person who starts the business is not the same person that you need in order to run the company. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that you have to change personnel. I mean, you have to change mindset, right?
Hmm.
The same like mentality and habits and things that you often do when you're starting a business. Most people, when they start a business, they do it all themselves. They have full control over everything, right? You're doing it all. And that's great. And you can have a very successful business doing that, but you will not grow because you only have so much capacity. So the mindset has to start shifting, and that was a big shift for me. Even though it's something I desired, letting go of certain things, right? Like that was difficult in a sense because I'm the
What did
type of
you?
person.
What were a few things you had to let go of?
uh, Things like even my calendar. That was a challenge. Wendy, my executive assistant, would laugh because it took a while for me to actually give up calendaring. But here I was, double booking, triple booking, right? And all those things. And eventually it just came to the point where I was like, okay, I need to hand this over. She
Hmm.
has the capacity. I hired her for this and everything, but here I am still trying to book things. And because there was something about having that sense of control.
Hmm.
Payroll, right? Something else. Again, being a business, it was very important to me to have full control over every penny, cent, dime, nickel that came in and out of the organization. And here I am at the end of the day or the end of every 2 weeks, after everything else that I'm doing, trying to go through and put together payroll for people because we have a lot of consultants that work as independent contractors. So
Hmm.
it's not just a click the button, this is the salary. It is this month they may have made $6,000. Next month they may make $10,000. The following month they may make $5,000. So it's fluctuating all the time, and I'm spending the time going through and calculating. Okay, what did they work on? It was wasted time for me. Another thing was the marketing. So having a marketing background, that was a tough thing, right? Because I'm like, hey, I have a marketing background, and yeah, and I grew the company to a certain a certain size and to a certain place, but it got to a place where I needed to take a step back and say, some of my marketing strategies that I learned back in 2001 are not, they're not keeping up with today's market. And I want a specialist. I want someone who really knows this. This is what they do. This is what they eat, sleep, and breathe is marketing.
Mhm.
And how much time does that free me up to do other things, right? So those were some of the challenges that were difficult for me. Those three in particular. I mean, there's all types of things where now, when I get an email from the team, I'm like, do you actually need me on this call? Like, do you need my input? Because if not, thanks for letting me know, but I trust you to handle it. And they do a wonderful job with that. But it took me a while to get there, right? It took building that trust. It took not only that, but when someone was doing something that was different than the way that I would do it, resisting the urge to step in, because it would break down the confidence. I would see them doing something. I would give something to someone, delegate it to them. And as they started doing it, because it wasn't necessarily the way that I would do it or the way
Mhm.
that I thought it should be done. Okay, great. Let me just step in and just kind of help out a little bit and all those things. And people would step back. They would put their hands up and go, okay, sorry, you got it. And now the next project would come up and I would go, hey, like you want to take that? Or like, no, I got it. You got it, Jahmad. So I had to retrain myself to move from being the doer of all things to really learning how to be more of a CEO. And what does that look like? How do I focus on the things that are going to advance the company and get myself out of the weeds? How do I hire the right people and also invest in them enough that they understand that I trust them to lead their work and lead their department? And that was a shift. It was a huge shift for me.
Are you familiar with the Eisenhower matrix?
I don't think so.
So it was a very famous matrix and spoken about a lot within business literature. So it's essentially a quadrant where you've got different options, so buckets. So it's do, decide, delegate, delete,
Yes, 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 yes,
and
yes.
it's just figuring out: do you do the task? Do you decide to do it later? Do you delegate it, or do you delete it? And I think that's that's one of the biggest challenges I think business owners go through is what what do you need to do now? What's going to give your business the most leverage, and what's actually the challenge that makes the biggest difference? Because again, if we talk about the Pareto principle, it's probably only 20% of the activities that make 80% of the revenue, and
That's
maybe
right.
this is the case with clients as well. So maybe that's the case where you have to cut off the not so good clients so you can focus on the clients you can bring more value to, and they can bring more value to you and the business. And equally, your time is not best served figuring out who's worked what hours and then making payments. This is just it's just a data driven, rational decision. Is someone who's they billed at $100 an hour and they've worked 10 hours, then it's $1,000. That's it, and frees your time up towards the uh, higher leveraged activities. So, talking about high leverage activities within the business, and if we talk about growth, the concept that we started with, what's the growth strategy right now for the business? How do you go to market at present?
Yeah. Right now we are we were spending a lot of time really developing. I think as you and I mentioned before, you and I were having another conversation around this, really leveraging technology and
Hmm.
figuring out how are we not using technology, but how are we actually integrating technology? And I think that that's different, right? There's things that you can do where you can bolt on technology at the end and stuff like that, but it's completely different to actually integrate it into your practices. And that's what we're really focused on right now and going to market with different things. Um, it's a huge part of our growth strategy right now is how do we use AI, right? And we're now, I think I would call it second stage AI. What I mean by that is first stage AI was a lot of the basics. Let's figure out how to ask AI this question and speed up time to do this, that, and the other. If we're working on a proposal, let's ask AI to proofread it or to help us make sure that the wording looks great and those types of things. We need to do some research. Let's ask AI, if it can. pull up, these 5 different reports or strategies or something like that. So that was kind of stage one for us, was just getting more comfortable with AI and using it for those basic things to just cut down on time. And what I'm really excited about where we're going for stage two is really looking at how do we actually use AI for systems, right? How do we begin to automate some stuff that is going to allow us to do things in a completely different way? So I think that for us right now, that's a huge part of our growth strategy and like going to market and all those things. Not losing the human element of the work, because that's really important, especially as I mentioned, we customize so much of our work. But yeah, really figuring out how do we, kind of going back to growth. I I think that AI is just this. I don't want to call it an untapped resource, but I'll say an underutilized resource, because we're still figuring it out and it's still so new, that will help businesses move into companies a lot faster, right? Like
Mhm.
you can now do some of the work of a big company even though you're still a small company, right? And that's what we're really looking to do, and to figure those things out, not to overutilize it, meaning that it takes away the feel that people like and love about our company and about our products. But how do we use it in the back end to make us way more efficient, make us way more effective? So that's a big part of our growth strategy right now.
Mhm. And looking at the history of the business, what has been the go to market approach? I imagine that with a lot of the deals that you generate, they would come in via referrals because the sales conversion rate is so high. But is there anything you're actively doing on LinkedIn, networking events, anything else of sorts that has been really your key penetration point?
Yeah. So a lot of what we've done has been, we get a lot of our business through referrals, so that helps us a lot. By the way, I'm going to say this, and people might think it's strange. It's not the greatest thing. And the reason why I say that is because when you rely so heavily on referrals, and referrals are great, right? Because like you said, they're hot leads and everything else. You already have credibility, and it does not allow you to control your market penetration. It's not a lever that you can turn on and turn off and all those types of things. You're really at the mercy of the referrals. Are people giving you referrals? And this was a huge issue for us about 3 years ago. I noticed this, that so much of our business was coming in through referrals, which meant that we weren't doing a great job going to market and marketing. So one of the things that we took a look at, Joe, was when, for example, when I speak or keynote a conference, um, the amount of business that comes from that is overwhelming, right? Anytime that I deliver a keynote, we normally end up with somewhere. I think Wendy told me, we were looking at this a couple of months ago. I think she told me on average, it's like 7 new clients from a 1 hour speech. Highly effective for us. There's something about, as the people would say, the feel of the wheel, right? It's like the test drive. It's hard sometimes to explain what it is that we do until you actually experience it. And so when I deliver a keynote, people get to experience it. They get to experience our process. They get to experience the way that we deliver things. And they get to experience what I mentioned earlier about that application. Because anytime that I deliver a keynote, it's not just theory. Again, my goal is to always give people at least 2 to 3 things that they can take away and apply. And
Mhm.
every single time the floodgates open. So that's been a go-to-market strategy. One of the things that we're working on now, though, is having a bigger presence on LinkedIn, and that has really worked for us. And what I found about LinkedIn is not always bringing in brand new people, but what it's doing is someone who has experienced us somewhere else, it keeps us at the top of their mind. And now the timing is right. And because they saw something on LinkedIn, they reach out and they'll say, hey, Jahmad or whoever that they're reaching out to, we we saw you speak 2 years ago, or I used to be at a company that you were working with, and I'm now at this new company, and I think you would be perfect to us. But that's happening through LinkedIn, and that was different for me. And again, our team had to really help me understand that, because I was expecting LinkedIn and the work that we were doing there and the work that we were investing into LinkedIn was going to just drive all these brand new clients. And what I found that, again, it's driving business, but in a much different way than what I expected, because most of the people they're not fresh. They're not green. They're people that we've been connected with. They're people who have been following us. And now, because of something that we posted, they have a problem in their mind that they're trying to solve. That's a very
Hmm.
real problem for them in the moment. And we are that in time solution that happened to pop up on their screen that they're thinking, yes, let me reach out to Potential Unleashed Consulting. So those are our kind of market strategies that we're utilizing right now. Again, live events and public speaking, and then LinkedIn has been fantastic for us.
A very profound mindset shift that I try to help clients with when they're looking at their growth strategies and channels is to move away from the thought process of funnels, because as
Yeah,
you're aware, a funnel is it's very linear. Whereas if you move over to what we like to think of as a flywheel, it's, as you said, someone will, the activation point might be a speech, a networking event, but they don't have pain there. I would not go to a chiropractor unless I have a back pain or I have
yeah,
back pain. So it's a case of, if I have them, as you said, front of mind, and I'm engaged with their emails and I've seen the correspondence, you find these people who have seen those dozens of touch points, and we know that stuff such as consulting, it's not a cheap service. It's not an impulse buy. It's not a
right.
coffee which you just pick up or you take for a test. It's a case of, you want to build that relationship. You want to have confidence in the certainty of the person who's executing their skill sets with you. So by them seeing emails and engaging with you on LinkedIn, seeing you at other events, and even maybe just soft check-ins, that's where they build that trust with you that takes time to compound. And that's where, if you think of it like a flywheel, it's a case of just different things resonate with different people, and it's a trust
So true.
building exercise. So it sounds as though you're massively on the mark as to what you're doing there. When we spoke a few weeks ago regarding AI, how are you envisioning AI fits into that piece altogether?
Yeah. Do you mind if I go back to just something that you just said, Joe?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, please do.
I think that was like resonates so much, everything that you just said about the flywheel. And you mentioned trust, and I think that that's really key, because what I've noticed as well, and again, the team really helped me understand this, because I'll be honest, I was adverse to social media, right? It's just not, it doesn't really fit my personality in a lot of ways, meaning I'm a very private person. And I don't do things for, I'll say it this way, I struggle with the spotlight, right?
Hmm.
So even though I speak and keynote, things of that nature, I would never post about those things. And it would drive my team up the wall. They're like, hey, did you get any pictures? I'm like, nope, I forgot. I'm the type of speaker that I feel uncomfortable when they read my bio, right? Before I speak. It's just uncomfortable to me. Like, oh, let me tell you about all of his accomplishments. So because of this, my team really had to learn how to work with me and make things comfortable. But one of the things that they really helped me understand was, and it goes back to the trusting that you meant, some people will hear us or experience us, but it is by them also seeing the pictures, the images, the posts of other organizations that we're working with that gives them the trust to finally move forward. Right? They're like, oh, and it's so interesting because the messages will come in. They'll say, hey, I just saw you working with, Providence, for example, Providence Healthcare. And
Hmm.
because they work for a healthcare organization, because they saw us working with Providence, all of a sudden now they have the trust to take the step. They've been
Hmm.
in like you said, they've been in community with us for, a while, a year or 2 years, whatever. But now they see this post about Providence and they think, oh, they're like us. They're similar.
Hmm.
Huh. Providence trusts them. Maybe now's the time for me to move this forward. And so that was again, something that did not click for me initially. It took the team a lot of coaching of me, and you just hit it so well. I'm thinking, Joe, I wish you and I had met years ago, because a lot of the things that you're talking about, the flywheel and all those things, it would have saved me a lot of time and probably saved my team a lot of frustration and tried to help me shift my mindset on some of that stuff. So I just wanted to mention that, because it's been really interesting, that trust piece that you mentioned, that it is people seeing those things and going, okay, all of these other organizations trust them, maybe we should trust them too. So,
Mm-hmm.
so sorry, I just wanted to mention that because it just really resonated with me when you said that. Your question was about AI. Please, would you mind repeating?
I asked, how are you blending AI into your growth strategy now to go to market?
Yeah, so kind of like what I was mentioning, from social media and our social media posts, from the way that we have redesigned our website, just a lot of different things, asking what are things that people are looking for right now. And just, it's amazing the amount of information that you can pull from AI. So we're using it in so many different ways, even as we think about the creation of new products. One of the things, of, for example, is in the US, people are struggling right now with the work of diversity, equity, inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big, big thing. And we have used AI to ask, what are the things that people are searching for? And what we found is that companies now more than ever are actually looking for online options, because budgets are smaller. They may not be able to bring someone in and pull people offline like they used to put, the entire company through a training. So people are looking to still do the work, but they need to do it with a reduced budget. And so online options are becoming more important than ever before. So we just finished designing 2 brand new online programs that we're launching specifically to meet that need. That was, again, just through us asking AI, like, what are the top searches that you're seeing when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion? And the top searches were, what are the best online programs or the best online options for diversity, equity, inclusion? We're like, oh, would have never known. We would have designed something completely different. We would have thought about still doing the in-person workshops and stuff like that. We've always had online options for companies, but what we're seeing now is, oh, we needed to design what we call open workshops. That means, 3 people from this organization and 3 people from this organization and 5 people from this organization can just log in and attend that. Would have never ever thought of that as a viable, you know, as a viable piece of the business if it had not been for AI. So we're using AI a lot, for our go-to-market strategies and stuff like that. We're also using AI, from things as helping us design our surveys. So after we deliver a workshop or after we're working with the organization, we're using AI. We have developed a brand new app called Human-Centered Technology. And so we're using AI in that as well. The app helps to keep people engaged in between workshops. So if we're working with the organization, let's say, for example, over the course of 6 months, how do we keep people engaged, in the in-between sessions, or excuse me, in between the sessions and stuff like that? We're using AI to really help us with that and to create different activities and information and all those things to keep people engaged during the in-between times when we're not in front of them in person. So lots of different ways. And again, I would say, and what my team tells me all the time, we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
I love the way how you speak of quite a lot of people. They This kind of falls in line with your personality as to what you said. They try to put the limelight on them, and they say, "I've done this and I've done this," but you're very feels like your team is very much on the same level as you, and you see it as maybe you're the person who leads from the back, who looks at what everyone's doing and then feeds that information in and learns what's working, and then looks to just steer the ship from the back. The captain needs to be able to have a good view of everything that's going on in front of him, in front of them. That's the impression that I get, which is credit to you.
Thank you. Again, I give credit to a lot of my mentors who I watched them lead that way and saw how effective it was to. I look at it like this. I lead when I need to lead, so I'll get in the front when I need to get in the front. So again, like the keynotes, right? A couple of years ago, I was saying, hey, I think I'm going to be done with keynotes. I want to do more of the background stuff and everything else. And someone said, if we do that, the company will die within 2 years. I thought, what? And that's when we really started looking at the data and analyzing the data and realizing how much of our lead generation was coming off of the keynotes. So I'm willing to take the front and lead in those moments. And also, the way that I view my role is to support and remove the barriers for the team, because they are brilliant. They're excellent. They're amazing at what they do. So how do I help remove barriers? How do I help provide access to things when they bring something to me? I tell them all the time, if it's a good idea, we're going to invest. Like I believe that you've done your due diligence, you've done the things that need to do, and that you have the company's best interest at heart. And if it makes sense, we're definitely going to invest in it. I can't come up with all the ideas. You don't want me figuring out these things, right? But it definitely, again, I've been in some organizations and companies that have not led that way, where it's been very top down, where people have been micromanaged. It never felt good to me. I've been in other organizations where people have given way too much leeway and there was no structure, so people didn't feel supported. And so I've just tried to find a happy middle. And again, not that we get it right all the time, and it's taken a huge transition to figure that out, going again from a business to a company, but that's the way that I try to lead. So I appreciate that, Joe.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of synergies there. Us as founders, we want someone to come to us with the present with a bow on top and say, here, open it and see what's inside. And you're like, that's why I brought you into the team, because you're not saying, hey, I think we should do this, then there's nothing there. For me, there's very few things when we're growing. If someone can present something and say, hey, this is what I want to do, here's the use case, here's what I think it could potentially do for the business, and this is why I think we should invest into it, as opposed to just saying, have you thought about this? And so I've thought about everything. Honestly, I've thought about everything, and I'm going to sleep thinking about everything. So don't give me another thing to think about. I don't want to think about any more things. But if
Right.
you say, hey, how about you go to sleep with this really nice pillow? Okay, yeah.
I love it. No, you're so right. Absolutely, Joe. I'm with you 100%. I don't need another thing to think about. What I need is for you to have thought about it. I trust that you've thought about it and thought it through. And if you need me as a thought partner on it, okay, great. But I need you to have some ownership on this and be passionate about it, right? Like if you're passionate about it because you really believe that this is going to help us, and again, I believe that you have the best interests of the organization at heart, let's figure it out. Let's figure it out.
Emphatically. Jahmad, it's been a pleasure. Where can people find you and what's next? We'll include all the
Yeah.
links, so don't worry about
Thank you.
small details.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, at our website, www.potential-unleash.com, on social media, they can find me and the company on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all those different places. And what's coming up next? A couple things I'm really excited about. A new book. So I'm really excited about that.
What's the name?
The new book, I haven't named it yet, but I think it's going to be called Hijack. That's what I'm thinking. But it's really going to, my first book that I wrote, Ideal, one of the chapters that I get the most feedback on is chapter 5, where I talk about dealing with fear. And so I think this book is really going to focus on expanding that. Because I only wrote about it in one chapter, but I get the most feedback about that chapter. People go like, that chapter blew my mind. It was amazing. Could you explain more? So I think I'm going to write this book. Actually, is kind of what's on the wall back over here. I've outlined some stuff around that. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, is spending the summer writing that book, figuring out what it needs to look like. And then just some other really cool stuff. We have a new partnership with an organization called 80 Grit Consulting that's doing phenomenal work. They actually just released their book. And we have some combined synergies that we're putting together right now to offer to people. So I'm really excited about some of the work that we're going to do there. And honestly, Joe, more than that, looking forward to a lot of personal stuff. The kids are about to be out of school for the summer, so I'm looking forward to that and spending time with them, doing some family vacations and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the future is bright. Businesses are growing and doing well, and I'm just looking forward to to learning the things that I don't know yet. Right. Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I'm really, really excited. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the platform and the conversation. And seriously, thank you for the work that you're doing. I've loved this conversation. And again, I've watched other episodes and stuff. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.